Hi guys and welcome back to the channel. Today I've got the tank review for the brand new Eastern Alliance Era 3 Premium Heavy Tank, the Object 490 Topol. Now, if you do like the video, as always, don't forget to like and subscribe down below, as it really does help out the channel. And yes, the Object 490 Topol. It's the tank that you can get for the Ultimate Season Pass for, essentially, what is 4,000 gold, because you do get 2,000 gold of the Season Pass back through the rewards you get throughout completing the Season Pass. So it's essentially 4,000 gold for an Era 3 Premium, which is always an absolutely fantastic deal, because... well, they're always super expensive in Era 3, right? So 4,000 gold for this kind of thing, which makes really good credits and all that good stuff, is always a good deal. So what's the Topol like? Well, I don't think it's that great. It's one of those tanks that I feel like if all of the other Era 3 tanks were balanced in a manner that this tank is, I think Era 3 would be a little bit better than it is. But for what the tank is, it's quite far below par, really, because the gun handling on this tank feels pretty derpy at times, which is really frustrating, especially when it says that it's pretty accurate, and it just misses, and you're like, oh, thanks, gun. The armour on it is very hit and miss, but it's troll, which can be usable. This lower plate is very pennable, but the upper plate will bounce you quite a lot. If you're shooting at the turret like this, you can go through the turret front quite easily if you've got about 700 plus pen. And if you're trying to track and pen this thing from the front, it's very, very difficult unless you're shooting up into the drive wheel, just because of the way the armor model is. So if you're going to track this thing, always try and go for the back wheel, because, well, that's how you're going to track and pen this thing. Because of this spaced armor here as well on the side, it means you do get some very, very troll bounces off the side of this tank. The armor on this tank is very, very troll, but it's also super annoying to try and use yourself, because it seems to be that you go, yes, I'm bouncing shot. Oh, no, I'm being penned by everything, right? It does absorb weasel shells every now and then off the front as well, because of how the spaced armor is, which is definitely really, really nice. The armor is one of the strengths of the tank, is in the fact that it can ricochet shots here and there, but to be honest, it's not infallible. But that's quite nice, and that's why I say, if everything was balanced like this tank, it would be quite nice in Era 3. But yeah, so it has a fair few weak points, to be honest. If this was full price, I'd say absolutely not. Never in a million years. I'd still say the Leopard KWS-3, which came out a couple of weeks ago, is better than this tank, and that's another heavy tank, right, that's come out recently. But yeah, it's a middle Era 3 premium, and like I said, I don't think it's the best tank in the universe. I think it struggles in quite a lot of ways. I'm not a big fan of it. Plus, it's in Era 3, which is a problem in of itself. But without further ado, let's get into the old statistics of the Object 490 Topol. So, you've got a 1,000 horsepower engine, with a 72 km/h top speed and a 30 km/h reverse speed, with 24.1 horsepower per ton ratio, which means you hit the 72 km/h pretty easily, and you got that reverse speed is pretty damn nice. You could make this quicker with the traction system if you wanted to get up to 79 km/h, and that would then go up to 33 km/h reverse speed, but it's completely down to you. I don't do that because I really want to try and make the gun usable, so yeah, but 72 is still quick enough. You got 12% fire chance, which is something that is fairly low, which is pretty good, because you don't really get set on fire all that often in this tank, in my experience of the 21 games I've played in it so far. The 3.6k HP is pretty decent for using for trading. It's middle of the road for the middle Era 3 premiums, or Tech Tree, or anything, the middle Era 3 tanks in general. You got 44 degrees a second hull rotation speed, which is pretty quick, but sometimes it feels a little bit sluggish. You've got 1.7 on soft, 0.8 on medium, 0.7 on firm, which is pretty good ground resistances. Camo doesn't really matter. View range, you've got 485 meters, which is actually a little bit lower for Era 3 tanks, but again, it's not too bad. You don't really rely on that too much. You got a 40 degrees a second turret traverse speed, which means it is slower than your track traverse. So if you do help the track traverse with the traction system and clutch braking, etc., you do want to get rapid aim on this turret, because the turret traverse is a little bit slow, and you will feel that while you're trying to snap the gun on target. So bear in mind that the turret traverse is a lot slower than your tracks, so you want to help that out if you can. You've got 1.12 accuracy during rotation, which is really not that good, and you want to help that out as much as possible with gun stabilizer and the gun perks. It means the gun does bloom out quite a lot for an Era 3 tank, where, you know, in an era where most tanks have like 0.5 to 0.6. on this accuracy during rotation, which means their guns don't bloom out very much at all. This thing does quite badly if you don't help it. You've got 6 degrees of gun depression, which is a bit of a pain as well, because naturally it means you do struggle on a ridgeline, whereas there's quite a few tanks that won't have that problem. You do have 14 degrees of elevation, though, which isn't too bad. You've got 8.6 seconds reload, which gives you 3.8k base DPM. Now, the DPM on this thing, compared to a lot of the heavy tanks that I have for Era 3, granted I don't own all the Era 3 tanks, is the lowest. It's not very. It's pretty not very good at all. The DPM on this tank. It's actually like 200 or 300 worse than the KW3S, which was the latest Era 3 premium heavy tank to come out, and that's got higher alpha, which means it's generally better for that thing. And it's got better pen as well, right? And mobility and armor that's probably pretty comparable to this thing. So yeah, the DPM is a little bit low on this tank, and I will, when I fully kitted out the tank, show you the difference between the DPM on this tank compared to the other tanks that I do own in Era 3. Because granted, I don't own them all. You have 0.28 accuracy during, at 100 meters, which is pretty good. And you get that down to about 122? No, 0.22, which is, again, really accurate. But again, the gun just feels like it likes to miss. The gun just likes missing shots at times, this thing. And you sit there going, but how did that go low? Or how did that go to the right? I had it fully aimed on the side and it hit the right and ricocheted. Oh, okay, gun, thank you. It's one of those guns, kind of like the KWS3 as well. The KWS3 does the same, where it's pretty accurate, but at the same time, it just loves to hit the floor. You got 2.82 accuracy during movement, which is really not very good for Era 3, again, and it means the gun does bloom out a hell of a lot. And once again, this is where I'm saying that, you know, if a lot of the tanks in Era 3 were sort of based around these sorts of values again, and it meant that you do have to take an extra second or two to make sure that your gun is fully aimed in on target to get the hits, Era 3 would probably be a little bit nicer as well, because it'd be a little less snappier and stuff like that. 2.3 second aim time, which again is quite slow for Era 3. It does feel a little bit of a pain in the fast-paced environment that Era 3 is. You have 3 rounds, which is APFS, DS, and HE, with 606 penetration, which is pretty good. 697 penetration on the premium APFS DS, which is pretty damn good again. Means you'll pen most things you're going to face. And 155 pen on the HE, which means you can actually pen some other lightly armoured vehicles with it in Era 3, but it's not that useful, except for when you're facing against Malos, which it can be. Because you have 690 damage on that HE, which means you can splash for about 300, 400, about 300 on a Malo. You got 550 HP of damage on the standard and premium round as well, which is okay. You got 1700 meters a second shell velocity, which is pretty damn good. And you've got a 150% silver bonus for this Era 3 tank, which means you do make good credits, but is on the lower end of the silver bonuses. So let's have a quick look at the armor model of the tank. So as you can see here, the most well-armored section is the little section around the gun mantlet. 530 on that gun mantlet, with 500, by the way, being that's where the actual hull armor starts. All the rest of this is kind of spaced armor, okay? So that's where the hull armor starts. And yeah, the little side cheeks here is 500mm as well. You got 450mm on that section of the side cheeks, which is where the turret armor is pretty nice, because you have 450 right next to the gun mantlet, which is where it is angled. But behind that gun mantlet is only 100mm of armor, so it's about 550. So if you've got about 700 pen, you will go through the front of the tank in front of it, well, straight through the front of this turret here on the Topol, which is something that you can aim for if you've got anything. Well, a lot of tanks do have 700 plus pen on their premium rounds, which means, yeah, they're going to start going through the front of your turret front, which is something you've got to be careful of. But this upper plate is absolutely phenomenal. This will ricochet so many shots. It's only realistically the Malo and the 292 gun and something like the Thumper or the KWS3 with the extremely high pen that will go through this upper plate, just because of how angled it is. 140mm thickness plus that 500mm plate directly behind it means that you will ricochet a lot of shots off the upper plate, which is why people have to aim for this lower plate, which is really not very good, which is, again, actually pretty good for the... It's pretty good realistically, because it's got 80mm of armor on that lower plate. And then behind that lower plate is a 50mm armor section, which means pretty much all tanks in the era will go through that lower plate, but they have to hit the lower plate, right? So the lower plate is very, very pennable. That is the weak spot for the tank if you can hit it. And like I say, you want to try and avoid this spaced armor section here on the tracks, because this spaced armor section here on the tracks, combined with the side and track armor and the fact that the hull actually kind of starts here, means that a lot of the time, if you're aiming at this section, you will probably ricochet or bounce, okay? You might be able to track the tank without penning it, but be aware that trying to shoot it in this section here is a very, very troll area to shoot, and you're always better to shoot for the back end of the Topol, okay? And that's how you're going to track and pen this tank as well. So that you just be very, very wary of shooting this. Like I said, the only way you're realistically going to track and pen it from the front is if you're kind of shooting up at an angle at this tank, right? So that's just be very, very wary of the armor on the vehicle. Like I say, it's very, very... It's the type of armor, again, that seems to be like, yes, I'm doing really well. Oh my goodness me, everything's penning me, right? That's the type of armor that it feels like with the Topol, but then that seems to be quite the way with Era 3, realistically. But because of that space armor as well, it is pretty decent frontally against ATGMs, as long as they do not hit that lower plate. If the ATGM obviously hits the lower plate, it's going to go straight through. But if the upper plate or the turret front, a lot of the time, they'll probably not do too much to you, which is great. So let's have a quick look at the modules as well for you. So let's have a look at the ammo rack. So the ammo rack is there in the turret. As you can see, the back end of the turret in the mid section there, that is all ammo rack. So if you want to ammo rack this thing, you can do that. And realistically, if a shell, in my experience, if a shell does enter that ammo rack, it's going to pop your lid. It really does. This thing is very ammo rackable, and that is a problem. The engine blocks are there as well. So if they shoot you through the lower plate, or through that back end there, they will damage your engine as well, which is something you've got to be very, very careful of. But it doesn't happen too often, so yeah. It's just that's where the engines are too, and that's where the crew are. There's literally 2 of them. Wow. Okay, there you go. So, without further ado, let's go have a look at what crew I put in this tank. I've just stuck it in the MBT-70 for now. So, in terms of a crew for the Topol, I run Born Leader, Rapid Reload, 6th Sense, Steady Aim, Snapshot, Run and Gun, Clutch Braking, Rapid Aim, Track Mechanic. I run Track Mechanic because there are many, many tanks in this era that can perma-track you if you do not put something on to be able to get your tracks back on quicker, so I run Track Mechanic. Rapid Aim because the turret traverse is worse than the track traverse, so I try and get the turret as quickly as possible so I can snap the gun on target quicker. Clutch Braking to make the track traverse better, again to make it feel a little bit more manoeuvrable and make that mobility feel better. Especially when you see a weasel coming for you, it's nice to be able to get the tracks back on target as quickly as possible. Or, you know, get your front pointed towards the weasel. The 3 gun perks, because like I say, this gun feels exceptionally troll for an Era 3 gun. It feels way worse than it should do. So I want to help this gun out as much as humanly possible. And then these 3 perks, because you're going to run these 3 perks on pretty much every tank that you play. And then, yeah. So, in terms of equipment on the Topol, I run with food, the advanced loader, the gun stabilizer, and vents. Why do I run vents? Because I want to make everything on this tank better. I want to make the aim time as good as it can be. I want to make the DPM as good as it can be, because like I say, it is a lot lower than a lot of the other tanks. I want to try and make it does help the turret traverse a little bit. I just want to try and make everything a little bit nicer on this tank because it does suffer in a fair few areas. I want to help the gun with the gun stabilizer to make it better at firing on the move and during rotation so that I can make the accuracy better again. And the advanced loader because you want to make the DPM 10% better as always. Like I say, you could drop the vents quite easily for something like traction system if you wanted to go faster. Or if the aim time does really annoy you, you could just run the GLD to make the aim time even better than it is. Well, even better than, I think it's 2.2 or something like that. You can knock it down to closer to 2 seconds probably. You want to make sure that you could switch to HE when you face the Malos if you want to without having to reload. You could run advanced reload. It's down to you and how you want to play the tank. As always, there is no right or wrong way to kit out a tank. It's how you feel comfortable and confident in playing said vehicle. So let's have a look at the statistics of this tank while it's fully equipped out. So as you can see, we've now got 48 degrees a second hull rotation speed instead of 44. Our view range is up to 537 meters of view range. The terrain resistances have got a little bit better. We've now got 49.84 degrees a second on the turret rotation speed, which means it's actually faster than the tracks now, which is good. You've got 0.74 accuracy during rotation, which again is better, but is a little bit worse than a lot of the tanks in the era. You got 6.77 second reload time, which is 4.8k DPM, but like I say, a lot of the tanks are starting to get a lot faster DPM than you at this point. I mean, it's one of the lowest ones out of the ones that I've got, and like I say, I'd like to point that out that I don't own all of them. You've got 0.22 accuracy during 100 meters, sorry, which is definitely like really accurate. But again, there's quite a few tanks that are more accurate than that. You got 1.56 accuracy during movement as well, which is again not bad, but it still leads to this gun not being as snappy as a lot of the other guns in the era. And you got 2.08 second aim time. So again, if you took the GLD, you're probably getting below 2 seconds aim time there, which would be a little bit nicer, probably. But with the vents, it just helps everything out and just tries to get this reload up as close as possible to others. Because that's what it's like fully equipped out. So remember this, 4.8k DPM on the Topol. So this is the 292, which was another Ultimate Season Pass tank, right? Or was it level 100 reward? Anyway, this is one that basically most people already own for Era 3. And this tank is far, far better than the Topol, which is one of the reasons that if you're hesitant, you don't really want to spend the 4k gold, and you've already owned the 292, you may as well just not bother picking up the Topol. So, this tank has a 6k DPM. And the accuracy of the gun is actually worse at 100 meters, but better during movement, but worse during rotation. Genuinely, the tank is far better. It's more mobile as well. In fact, it feels more mobile, even though it's 2 kilometers an hour slower. So you got 6k DPM on the Leclerc, which is obviously a top era. You've got 6.6k DPM on the Leopard KWS3, which recently came out. You got 5.2k DPM. And this is, by the way, without running vents or stuff like that to help the DPM as much as possible, right? So, and that's got really good pen. It's got higher alpha, and you do have more HP, but that's more because it's a top era as well. You've got the MBT-80, which again was a tank that was relatively recent, and a lot of people already have from the season passes. And that's got 6.2k DPM, right? And again, it's far more accurate and far better aim time. Penetration's worse though on the standard round, but the premium round more than makes up for that. You got the M1A1, which is a mid-era tank, and this is actually with the SOC gun as well. That has 6.5k DPM, and it's more maneuverable. You've got better penetration on the premium round, and the standard round's only slightly below it. But look at the accuracy on the gun, it is incredible. And the armor's, I'd say the armor on this tank is fairly similar to the Topol in the fact that it's sort of, it works and then it doesn't. You got the Peace Cells, which is the Leclerc Ares prototype, which again is a mid-era premium, and it's a 6.5k DPM, and the gun handling again is far, far, far better, with the mobility being absolutely fantastic too. And then the MBT-70 with no crew, but the equipment on it is 5.1k DPM, so it's still better than the Topol, although the MBT-70 has its own problems. So yeah, you're seeing the DPM problems that this thing has, and it just doesn't keep up with a lot of the tanks in terms of the DPM, and especially if there's a couple of tanks over, it just feels like you're slowly but surely whittling away at the enemy hit points, but they're just shredding everything so much faster than you are, which is a little bit sad for the Topol. Like I say, I mean, if it's in the Ultimate Pass, 4k gold, can you really go wrong for an Era 3 premium tank? For 4k gold if you don't own any others? Not really, but it's really not the best tank in the universe. It really isn't, and if you were to be looking at this tank review down the line, like 7 or 8 months down the line, and they're reselling this tank for full price, I wouldn't say it's worth it whatsoever. But then that's because you could probably just go pick up a Malo or a Weasel, right, and have a good time in Era 3 in that regards. But yeah, that's the Topol. It is the new tank for the Ultimate Season Pass, and like I say, for 4k gold, you can't go wrong with an Era 3 Premium. The only problem is it is naturally an Era 3, which has its own issues. But, yeah, it's one of those tanks. I don't think it's the best tank in the universe. So without further ado, I'm going to send you into the replays where you can look at this tank for itself and see how it handles and see if you think, yeah, you know what, actually, I quite the looks of this tank, I might pick it up, or, yeah, you know, okay, I might not pick this tank up. So without further ado, guys, I'll send you to the replays, and I'll see you there. So here we are in the replays with the Object 490 Topol, and this first game is on Vineyards, and on Vineyards what I'm going to do is charge up the A line straight across and then down the 9 line. As you can see, there currently is a bug with the skin of the Topol, which is something they're already aware about, where it just de-renders randomly, and you're looking at it going, I can see through the tank, but you can still shoot it because the on model's still there, it's just de-renders. But yeah, something to bear in mind with the actual skin. If you get the skin and put it on, your tank just disappear. You'll see that in the garage as well. But yeah, we're on Vineyards. And like I say, on Vineyards, what we're going to do is charge aggressively, because that's what you want to do. You want to get this flank, 'cause most of their team usually goes and sits up at J9 and then pushes down the K line. So instead of sitting around and chilling in the base or at spawn area, it's good just to get going and push this side as quickly as possible, because then you can also go and spot the guys that might be sitting up on top of the hill. So you can see I'm looking for shots at this Leopard 2A5, which is questionable choices because, well, the Leopard 2A5 is so strong. The Weasel's now coming. It's like, hello, Weasel. Oh, we end up missing that shot from quite close. He gives us a little nudge as he's running through. We've got the Alpha to kill him in one shot, and naturally, we don't kill him in one shot, because why would we? And that little pesky Weasel gets away. So we're going to move up now as close to the buildings in front of us over there, because what I want to do is get hull down over there and start shooting the people that are on the sniper hill. Plus I can shoot towards this heavy tank that's currently spotted at D0, so I can actually shoot him as well. Plus we can get up close to this heavy tank that's in front of us, the... Was it a... Yeah, it's the 285. I say heavy tank, it's an MBT. Era 3, doesn't really matter what the classes. We go for the snapshot there on the MBT 80, but sadly the shot just goes somewhere. We go for the next shot into the MBT 80, and that one actually bounces through the smoke. We go for the shot into the Topol this time, but sadly we end up hitting the outside track, or we hit the upper plate at an outside ricochet anyway. So now we're going for the 2A5 that's in the open. We're just looking for the shot, but sadly he just gets beyond our ability to shoot him. We go for the shot into the 477A, which was never going to work at that distance. We were never going to go through that guy. And I'm starting to look at this going, right, what do I need to do? Well, you know what? We're being a bit stagnant. They're getting spotted up on top of that hill, but we're not getting shots that we want. We see the Topol at the back, and sadly the shot just deviates to the right and ends up doing track damage only to him. And yeah, we're seeing all these guys getting spotted, but we just don't really have the shot. But thankfully, they get a shot finally through the back of the 477A. And yeah, they're all in cover, so I'm starting to think, you know what, I just need to push. We just need to push, get into the dip, get rid of this Topol that's spotted currently. We get a nice shot towards the Topol there, which doesn't pen him, but it tracks him because, again, the shot just went to the back end of the tank rather than where I was aiming. And we're just going to keep ploughing on into the dip, underneath the gun line of all these tanks that are sat on top, because we don't want to be sat in the open where they can easily shoot us, because that wouldn't be very good for us, would it? So we're now in a position where we can shoot the stuff like the Thumper. So we go for the shot into the side of the Thumper, which was a poorly aimed shot really, and we only do track damage. We don't actually pen the Thumper. That guy is starting to look like he's coming for us, and I was kind of fearing that he might just full send, because, well, it's Era 3, it's what people do. But unfortunately, we bounced off the Thumper, and good for us, he didn't end up coming after us. We get a shot into the side of the Thumper. We get shot in the side, though, and I'm like, what did you shot me? Oh, it's you, Mr. Topol. Okay, no, go away, sir. Let me farm your friends. We come back over, get a shot into the Thumper, track him in place. He starts to get farmed, which is glorious. If you can try and track people, that's always a good thing to do in Era 3. And we finish off the Thumper with an RBRT into the back end of his tank. We just see the front of that Topol there. I was hoping to get a cheeky shot into him, but couldn't quite get it. The Chieftain, Mark 11, we try and get a shot through the front of his turret, because that thing's turret armor is terrible, but sadly the shot missed. We're now going after the other Topol, which we get a shot through his side, which damages his ammo rack. Like I say, the ammo rack tends to go quite a lot on this tank. We now get round the side of this guy whose hull's disappeared, and we pen him in the side yet again. He's ammo rack though, so his DPM is terrible, his reload is awful, so we knew we could get another shot in, but sadly, with the auto aim, we ended up hitting the side of his turret, and we just ricocheted, which is a sad time. We're up to 4,000 damage, 2.6k assistance, and now I'm going to push these two heavy tanks that were sitting on top of their sniper hill, which is the Chieftain Mark 11, and I believe another Topol. So we're going to go chasing after these guys if we can, see if we can get some more damage on them. They are speeding away at the speed of sound. Got the RB on the Topol, but sadly the shot just misses. He then loops back round in front of us, which is like, hello, Mr. Topol, thank you for that. But again, sadly, the shot just ends up missing. But we're up behind the Topol, and we finish him off with a shell to the back end. Now, there's 4 tanks left on the enemy team. There's the 2 heavy tanks that are up at A5, the Topol directly in front of us, and a light tank that's knocking about somewhere. We bounce on the Topol on the move. He bounces off of us. Like I say, if people do hit your upper plate or hit you at a weird angle in the side, they will ricochet. Now we're below this Topol. We get a shot into his drive wheel, which tracks and pens him. He's now tracked in front of us. I think, well, maybe I can get another shot in that tracks and pens him again. But we only track him, and it's like, oh, okay, well, let's try and do it again. We go for the drive wheel to track and pen, but again, we end up only tracking it because he just moved backwards at the wrong moment. Now we go for the drive wheel again to try and track and pen it, but we don't. And this is because of that, what I was showing you with the armor model. And we're just going to keep him pinned. If we're not penning him, we may as well keep him pinned so our friends can. We're looking for another shot to try and track and pen him again. This time it does go in, and it does track and pen him. As you can see, I was aiming further back at a weird angle. We get another shot through his lower plate because he reverses just in time to avoid our tracking shot. We go up, and it's like, hello, Mr. Topol, let me just RBRT at you. And sadly, we end up bouncing. We should have just aimed for his lower plate. And the thing that happens quite regularly happened, which is the BMP ammo racks us. 80 GMs to your midpoint or to the side or to the back end of your turret where the ammo racks were, where I showed you. Blow the lid off this thing all the time. This is like, I think it's happened to me 6 or 7 times in the 22 games I've played in the Topol, 21, 22 games. The lid tends to get blown off quite a lot. If an ATGM hits that spot, your lid is going, okay? So just bear that in mind. So we finished that game with the 1327 base XP, the 5.5k damage, 4.3k assistance, which was, what, 9 and a bit k combined, which is not too bad. Fairly average game there for the Topol. And we're on to the second replay. And this second replay actually features the Topol with the traction system, vents, and the advanced loader. I did want to throw one in where we actually ran the traction system instead of the gun stabilizer, and I want to show it just because while you're on the move and while you're rotating, the gun handling is just that little bit worse without the gun stabilizer. Is it horrifically worse? It's not horrifically worse, it's just a little bit worse. And because of the fact that your DPM is much lower than everything else in the era, you want to make sure that this gun is going to be able to at least snap the shots in and at least make use of the fact that when you are loaded, you can actually hit the shots, right? So sadly, we went for the RBRT on the VFM5 there, but the shot missed by a country mile because, well, we didn't aim it very well, if we're honest. We're now looking for shots at the Type 85-2M, but he's actually behind cover over there. And I think, you know what? There's quite a lot of their tanks in the middle at E5. Maybe I can poke up here and get shots into their side. And as we come round, a Challenger 2 pops around. He puts a shot straight through my turret front, and we put a shot through his side. There's now a Magak 6B Batash over there, and we get a shot through his side too, which is nice, and thus we ignore those guys now because they've pulled back, and I think, you know what, I'm safe from behind. Look where my team is at H0. I'm not going to get shot in the buttocks if I go up here to shoot these guys in the side. So we pop up, get a shot into the side of the Topol, and this is where we can try and get some shots into these guys. But 6.5 degrees gun depression is going to be a little bit awkward in this scenario, which is where some of the other tanks like the M1A2, the Leclercs, etc. would be a little bit more flexible, because they'd be able to bounce the stuff off the turret front and then be able to get the gun depression to shoot those guys. But they all pull back at the sight of me, and thus I decide, you know what? Nope. We're going to go and loop around the back of the enemy team, who again are all sat at E6, so if we can get round behind them, that would be great. But we're just watching the TDs at the back to see if they are going to give us a shot, which they don't. So we decide, okay, yep, let's go. Let's go and put some hurt into these guys, which could be a little bit awkward. And again, that's where you're seeing the accuracy during rotation and movement being worse without the gun stabilizer. You just saw how large the aim reticle there was. And that's where you start to feel the 2.3 second aim time, which is quite long for Era 3. And that's where you have to really make sure that you're aiming your shots, where there's quite a few of the other tanks in Era 3 that will just be snapshot ready and get shots automatically straight through you, right? Which is where I say that the gun handling, while being good, is not as good as a lot of the other tanks in the era. But that's also why I say if a lot of the other tanks in Era 3 were balanced more similar to what the Topol is, then it might be a little bit nicer because of the less snapshotty nature of it. But hey-ho, we're looking for shots into the M1 here. We get a nice shot into the back wheel there that tracks and pens him, which gives us some juicy assistance. Now looking for shots into the Topol again. We're having to make sure that we aim the shot and it hits the dirt, because that's what this gun does. It does like doing that. We basically got it mostly aimed in, look for the shot into his side because that was the only opportunity we were going to get before he got away, and it missed. We go for the shot into the side of the Challenger 2, and it misses because this gun, like I said, this gun is very, very troll. We get a nice shot though into the side of the Topol, which tracks and pens, and I'm thinking, come on people, feed me tracking assist. We're up to 2.7k assistance so far, and there we go. We get more tracking assist on that guy, putting us up to 3.1k assistance. Now going after the other Topol that's down here, aiming it, and it flies straight into the side, thankfully. Only one tank left on the enemy team. It is the Thumper that's behind that hill with our two friends, which means we're not going to get anywhere near that guy as he got shut down by the other Topol. We finished the game with another fairly average total for the Topol with 6.8k damage, 3.1k assistance. That's nearly 10k combined. The victory with that near 10k combined. The Confederate medal, the second class, with 1301 base XP. Again, a fairly average game for the Topol there on that map. And that, again, that was just showing it with vents and the traction system, so you go faster, but you lose the gun handling while keeping everything a little bit better with the vents, right? So we're on to the third replay. And the third replay, we're here on this map, which is Serene Coast. And on Serene Coast, we are going to push aggressively towards C1, because it's one of those positions that if you win that C1 area, you can flank round into the base quite easily. There's a lot of positions you can go get hulled down. There's a lot of positions you can go keep yourself safe, and thus it's quite nice to win this area on Serene Coast. So we're ploughing towards it at the head of the charge. We actually get the shot snapped into that Topol though, which is always nice when the gun actually works like that. And now we're below these guys. We get a nice shot to the 477A there because we can actually go through his drive wheel at times. The other Topol is quite aggressive and poking over to get a shot in, but there's the tracking shot that we go for. We went for the track and pen, and we only tracked it. We go for the track and pen again, but this time we actually just ricochet because we hit that side plate. Like I say, you should avoid shooting that side plate if you can. There we go. We aimed underneath it. It went in, but we didn't track it. Now the 477A is coming over, so what we're going to do is try and make sure we're going to put every shot we can into this 477A because he's the raid boss. We need to get rid of this guy. But the Leopard KWS-3 charges in the way and says, shoot me, shoot me. So we go, okay. We are still trying to get the shots into the 477A, but sadly the shot into his side there only tracks him instead of penning him, which it happens quite often. We get a shot into his back end, which tracks and pens him again, and then I realise, oh boy, these guys are coming for me. Well, this is not good, and this is where you've got to realise in Era 3 sometimes, okay, we're doomed. Look how many of their tanks are here. There's only like 4 of us, and there's at least 6 or 7 or even 8 of their tanks directly in front of us. They have the massive overmatching numbers. We're not winning that flank. That's just not happening. So we realised, oh goodness me, I have to go because I'm dead. There's no point sitting there going, I should have tried to defend the flank because, what, I'd get another shot off and then die? Another 2 shots maybe? Die? What's that going to do to help the team? So we get away. We use the mobility of the tank to flee as fast as we can, and thus we are out of dodge, and we're going to relocate to another position to try and still help the flank if we can, still try and help these 2 heavy tanks, or these 2 MBTs that are currently sat there. The Weasel tried to get a cheeky shot into us. We luckily realised just in time. We get a nice snapshot into the Weasel. It's always great when those snapshots work. We're now looking at shots at the Leclerc in the distance, which tracks Ampen, and there's a Leopard 2 in front of us. They've killed one of the MBTs that was down at G1, which makes me go, maybe I should get out of here, because if they start charging towards it, it's not going to be a good time. We go for the shot into the Leopard 2, but sadly, when we had pretty much the whole side of the Leopard 2, it went up into his turret front. But we do put a shot into his back end, which damages his engine, damages his fuel tanks as well, straight through the lower plate of the Leopard 2, and it's like, hang on a minute, is that a Weasel up my buttocks? Hello, Mr. Weasel. Thankfully, he mucks his shot up because we were pushing him about, and we get a shot into him. We're fairly lucky there that that guy didn't do anything to us. It was like, whoa, hello, Mr. Weasel. But we're going to try our best to get rid of him. We give a little love tap, which I was hoping that it would blow his tracks off, but it didn't. We ricochet off the back of the Weasel, because why not? He's realised at this point that he's probably dead, and we shut down the Weasel. Pest control at your service. Good night, Mr. Weasel. We're up to 6.5k damage with 3k assistance. Now we're going to go after the Leopard 2, but I was thinking, actually, you know what? There's a Chieftain Mark 11 and another MBT that's in our cap, so let's go after these guys. And in fact, the Chieftain Mark 11 comes after us. He gives us a little ram. He's actually firing HU. We get a shot straight through his upper plate and finish him off after the MBT 70 popped a shot through his side. We're up to that 7.2k damage, and there's 3 tanks left on the enemy team. A TD, which is a Weasel, which we don't know where he is. He's probably running around like a lunatic. The Topol that's in front of us, we go for that shot into the back end, which we get into him for 7.7k damage now. There's only 1 tank left in front of us, which is the KWS-3. Can we get there to get the shot into him? And sadly not. And we know where the final tank is a Weasel. He was spotted down at D8, killing our, I think it was a T-72BU. So we're going to just use our ability to try and swing back that way if we can. And I think, you know what? Let's load a HE round to go after this Weasel. Not because 155 pen for 690 should go into a Weasel as long as we avoid the tracks. But to be honest, it's not the best idea to load the HE for the Weasel, because realistically, this tank has 850 meters a second shell velocity on its HE rounds, which is so much slower than the 1700 APFS DS. And yeah, you struggle to hit the Weasel with 1700 APFS DS, let alone 850 meters shell velocity HE. So we saw the Weasel, tried to see if we could get a shot into him, but we couldn't, and the Weasel ends up just driving off a cliff. And we finish the game with a pretty decent total there for the Object 490 Topol. We finish with the epic victory. Third on the team, 2 kills, 7.7k damage, 3k assist, again, 10, maybe nearly 11k combined, with that 1397 base XP. A pretty decent game there for the Topol on Serene Coast. And again, that's one of those where you've got to realise, oh my, we are doomed on this flank if I stay here. There is no point just sitting here and fighting it. We've got to try and get away so that we can do some more, we can influence the game in a different way. So we're on to the 4th and final replay of the video. Probably the best game I've had in this tank. And we are on Fredvang. And on Fredvang, what we're going to do is we're going to charge down the J line and then hopefully get somewhere up this 2 line. But what's going to end up happening is we're going to get stuck, because what usually happens is their team goes down the B line and then down the 8 line. And that's what I was fully expecting, because that's just the way Era 3 is. So we move up close to this rock. We're keeping our eye on the ridge lines in the distance along the E line, because that's where people tend to poke up. And we find the object 490 Topol. So we pop a shot his way. Sadly, we don't hit his turret front. Load premium rounds for the 688 penetration premium rounds, because I think maybe that'll go through his turret front. We actually aimed for his turret there. It looked like it was flying towards his lower plate, but it sadly hit the dirt. We go for the shot into the Weasel, which of course doesn't blow the tracks off the Weasel, doesn't pen the Weasel, it just does track damage only, because Weasels. We are now looking for shots towards... There is a TD in that smoke. I can see the TD in the smoke on the map, but I can't see the TD. And there it is. It's a thumper just pulled back just in time. Looking for shots now towards the MBT-80, which we have premium rounds loaded. And we're not going to go through the front of an MBT-80's turret with 700 pen at this distance. We need to go for the cupola if we can. So we just look for that cupola shot, but sadly the shell goes low and hits the turret front as opposed to the cupola. We reload the standard AP FSDS, because we don't need the premium round to go through that guy, and I kind of want the premium round in case of 477As coming after us and stuff like that. So we switch back to the standard, and now we're going to move up into a better position to get shots, because we're just sitting a little bit too static at this point to help our team out. We want to get ourselves in a different place where we can get the shots into the enemy team and keep this damage flowing. We get a shot snapped towards the Marder A3, but sadly, instead of hitting the whole back end that we had of that tank, we end up hitting the tracks, just aiming up to make sure that this shell goes into that Marder, and it does, which is great. Looking for more shots now into the enemy team and looking to see what the enemy team's doing. We notice that this piece cells is charging, so we aim the shot up, and sadly, that was just poorly led. We didn't keep the lead going, and thus the piece cells ends up getting away. But we slap the shot in to finish him off. Now there's a Leclerc and a Object 292 charging now. Well, back to the rock behind us at J3. We get a shot into the Leclerc. There's a little Weasel running around. I'm thinking, that Weasel's going to come back and kill me in a bit if I'm not careful. But the Leclerc's running around the back of my friend, so I need to help this guy out as much as I can. I need to keep the shots flowing. And this is where that DPM just feels a little bit slow for the era, because I feel like, oh, come on, you know, when I'm reloading, right? And again, if I'm in a M1A1, I've fired in 4.8 seconds. The Weasel sensors were tingling. That Weasel does end up flying up behind us, and yeah, he did a lot of damage to us there and puts us down to 1500 damage. Even though I managed to get my armor to him, we still lost a fair few hit points. But the 292 and the Leclerc behind us are still pressuring our heavy tank. We're trying to help him out as much as possible. We go for the shot into the Leclerc because I thought he was backing up, but he doesn't back up. We're now going for the drive wheel shot into the T-72BU. But sadly, only a little bit of the reticle was on the rock, and it decided to hit the rock. We get the drive wheel shot this time, though, and we're just waiting for the reload so we can try and do it again, because, again, in Era 3, one of the key things that you can do is track and pen tanks. So if you can track tanks, stop them dead, that is glorious, because that means that you can farm them for days, and especially with a lot of tanks in Era 3, you're going to have the DPM to be able to keep them permatracked, especially if they don't take trap mechanic, which quite a lot of people don't. So you can end up just penning them, keep them in a position where it's very easy for you to pen them, and if you can negotiate it so that it's a lot harder for you to be penned by them, then you're going to have a good time. We go for the RBRT into the T-72BU because we got a bit lucky that the Object 292 ended up missing. And we get another shot into the back of the BU. But this 292 is locked on. So I'm like, okay, you know what? I'm just going to keep my eye out for Weasels. Where is that Weasel gone? I don't know. We see the Topol in the distance. We go for the shot into the side of his turret. But sadly, instead of hitting the side of his turret, we actually hit his upper plate and it ricochets. We get the tracking shot in the 292. He is not looking at us. So what I want to do is try and track and pen this guy. So we go for that drive wheel again. Sadly, it doesn't track or pen. It just bounces. We're going for that drive wheel shot again. This time, it does track and pen. Glorious scenes. We keep him pen. We've actually damaged his Amarak as well. So I try and get the shot in. I was thinking, you know what, I'll go for the shot into the Amarak, but this time it doesn't go in. We actually hit his side and still didn't track and pen him. We get a shot into the back end, though, that sets him on fire, finishes him off. We've now got the shot into the back of the Topol to finish him off, which we do. Now there's another Topol that's out in the open. If we can try and push ourselves into position to get him. Again, going for that tracking shot to try and track and pen. This one only tracks, it doesn't pen because it went low. Aiming for that back drive wheel again. We have the track and pen shot, but again, it just goes extremely low. Doesn't track. Well, it doesn't pen him, but it does keep him tracked. But we do end up getting most of the assistance, and we get the finish on that Topol. That's where the gun can be really annoying, because we had 2 or 3 shots on that guy where we're aiming quite high to be able to track and pen it. but the shots just kept going low, so we were only tracking it, which is really frustrating. It's something that does happen again with this tank. We go for the little ram on the Weasel, which I know won't do too much damage, but I was hoping to track it. And sadly, we hit the Weasel, didn't track it, but it tracked us. Work that one out. Now, the MBT-80 is driven out to give us a free shot into his side, which is glorious. We're up to 8.5k damage, 3.8k assistance. That Weasel's still causing pain. And I was watching that MBT-80 and thinking, that MBT-80 isn't going to come back out. You know what? We're going to go after the Topol that was in the corner. I'm like, come with me, Mr. Challenger. I want your gun with me too. So I'm not, like, alone against that guy. But the Weasel is actually coming in. So we're going to aim up the shot. And, of course, just as we decide to pull the trigger, we hit the dead wreck. Luckily, though, we do manage to get our armor swiveled in time to not take the hit from the Weasel. We get a shot into his side, which puts him down to a one-shot. The MBT-80 drives out. It's like, well, don't mind if I do, Mr. MBT-80. We shut down the MBT-80, looking for the shot now into that Weasel again. Get the shot straight in. Low roll like a boss, which means we don't kill it with the one shot that we might have done. We aim up the shot into that guy, but unfortunately aim a little bit too low, and thus we end up hitting the dirt. Go for the little ram again, but just as we hit him, the M1A1 ends up finishing him off. The 490 Topol is still alive, which we snap the shot into his back end, get our 6th kill of this game, and there's only one tank left on the enemy team. And it is the Thumper in the distance, who we're not actually going to get anywhere near, and yeah, we don't get the kill on that guy or any more damage, but we did finish the game with a really nice total for the Topol. We finished with the victory. The 6 kills, 10,154 damage, the 3.8k assistance, the first class, the Top Gun, with the 1,735 base XP. A pretty decent game there for this tank. And yeah, that is the Object 490 Topol. Like I say, 4k gold essentially in the Ultimate Pass, because you do get the 2k gold back for completing the season. It's probably not a bad pickup, because you will earn a tank that will make you good credits, and if you don't own any other Era 3 premiums, then 4k gold is an absolute steal. But if you own any other Era 3 premiums, like 292 or the P-Cells or stuff like that, it's not really that worth picking up. So as always, everybody, thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time.
A great success!